Alexandria, the shining jewel of the Mediterranean, was founded in 331 BCE by none other than Alexander the Great. After his death, Egypt fell into the hands of his general Ptolemy Soter, who dreamed of building something far more powerful than walls or armies, a sanctuary of knowledge. His vision was bold: to gather every piece of wisdom, every discovery, and every story the world had ever produced, and preserve it in one place. Thus began the creation of the legendary Library of Alexandria. The library was not simply a building filled with scrolls. It was part of a greater institution called the Mouseion, the Temple of the Muses, where scholars, poets, and scientists worked side by side. It quickly became a magnet for the greatest minds of the ancient world. Euclid, the father of geometry, is said to have walked its halls, while Archimedes shared his ideas that would shape engineering for centuries. Travelers, traders, and ambassadors brought with them scrolls from Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and even distant China. Every ship that entered the bustling port of Alexandria was searched, and any texts on board were copied. The originals were kept in the library, while the copies were returned. In this way, knowledge from across the known world poured into the city like a flood. The scale of this project was breathtaking. Some estimates suggest that between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls were collected, covering subjects from astronomy to medicine, from poetry to philosophy. Translations were a key feature. Texts were rendered into Greek so that the wisdom of one culture could be shared with another. For the first time in human history, the dream of a global library was coming true. But it wasn't just the books that made Alexandria extraordinary. The Mouseion provided scholars with housing, stipends, and tools for research. Imagine a university, a laboratory, and a cultural hub all combined into one magnificent institution. The library was the heartbeat of intellectual life, while the city itself was a center of trade and culture, crowned by the magnificent Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Together, the library and the lighthouse turned the city into a beacon of light, knowledge and guidance shining across the seas. Yet with such greatness came fragility. The more knowledge that was gathered, the greater the risk of losing it all. For centuries, the Library of Alexandria has stood not just as a symbol of human ambition, but also as a haunting reminder of how easily civilization's most precious treasure, its memory, can be lost. What began as a bold vision to unite the wisdom of mankind would eventually end in mystery, tragedy, and questions that echo through history to this day. The Library of Alexandria was more than a building filled with scrolls. It was humanity's first attempt to collect and preserve the entire sum of human knowledge. Inside its walls, knowledge from every corner of the ancient world came together in ways never seen before. Imagine walking through long corridors lined with papyrus scrolls stacked to the ceiling, each one holding a fragment of human thought, a piece of the puzzle that explained how the world worked. The library's collections stretched across every field of study. There were medical texts from Egypt that described surgical instruments, herbal remedies, and even early forms of anatomy. From Mesopotamia came star charts and astronomical records that traced the movements of planets and eclipses. Indian scholars contributed ideas about mathematics and numbers, including the foundations that would one day lead to the concept of zero. From Greece came philosophy, poetry, and the logic of Aristotle and Plato, while Chinese manuscripts may have carried insights into medicine, philosophy, and inventions. Among the most celebrated scholars connected to the library was Eratosthenes, the chief librarian, who calculated the circumference of the Earth with astonishing accuracy using shadows and simple tools. Another, Aristarchus of Samos, put forward the revolutionary idea that the Earth revolved around the sun, a concept that would vanish for centuries before being rediscovered. Euclid's geometry, carefully preserved in the collection, became the foundation of mathematics and is still taught today. Religious and cultural texts were also a vital part of the collection. The famous Septuagint, the Greek translation of Hebrew scriptures, was created in Alexandria, making spiritual knowledge accessible across cultures. The library also preserved works of history, recording the stories of Egyptian pharaohs, Mesopotamian kings, and distant civilizations whose names are now half forgotten. But this was not only a place for preservation, it was a place of transformation. Translators worked tirelessly to render texts into Greek, allowing a scholar in Alexandria to read Indian astronomy, Babylonian medicine, and Egyptian theology side by side. It was an intellectual crossroads, where ideas clashed, mixed, and grew into something new. Even practical subjects were represented: agriculture, navigation, engineering, and architecture. There were maps of trade routes, guides to farming techniques, and designs for machines and water systems. The polymath hero of Alexandria, inspired by the environment, designed devices like the Aeolipile, an early steam engine, a glimpse of technology far ahead of its time. This vast ocean of wisdom was not just meant to be stored, but to be used. Scholars debated, tested, and expanded upon the knowledge preserved here, making the Library of Alexandria both a repository and a laboratory. It was, in every sense, the first true research university. The tragedy, of course, is that so much of this knowledge did not survive. What we have today are fragments, echoes of what once existed in abundance. The thought that humanity may have once held the keys to solving problems centuries earlier, diseases, inventions, even scientific theories, makes the loss of this library one of history's greatest heartbreaks. In the year 48 BCE, the Library of Alexandria faced its first great tragedy. The Roman general Julius Caesar had marched into Egypt. Caught in a brutal civil war between Cleopatra and her brother, Ptolemy III. The city of Alexandria, with its bustling harbor and narrow streets, became the battlefield where history and knowledge would collide. As Caesar's forces were pressed by the enemy, he made a desperate decision. To prevent the Egyptian fleet from being used against him, Caesar ordered the ships in Alexandria's harbor to be set on fire. Flames roared through the wooden vessels, and smoke filled the skies above the great city. But the fire did not remain confined to the harbor. It spread with terrifying speed, consuming warehouses that stood near the docks. These warehouses were believed to hold thousands of scrolls, copies and backups belonging to the Great Library. Some historians argue that the flames reached all the way to the main building itself, while others believe only the storage depots burned. Ancient writers like Plutarch and Dio Cassius mention the catastrophe, though their accounts differ, leaving us with mystery rather than clarity. Regardless of the details, what is certain is that countless scrolls, possibly entire collections of knowledge, were reduced to ashes in those terrible hours. Think of the loss: astronomical charts that mapped the heavens, medical treatises that could have cured diseases, historical records of vanished kingdoms, and philosophical works that might have changed the way humanity thought about the universe. All gone in the chaos of war. The tragedy reveals a painful truth. Knowledge is always vulnerable in times of conflict. To Caesar, the priority was survival and victory, not preservation of books. The scholars of Alexandria, who had dedicated their lives to collecting and protecting human wisdom, could only watch helplessly as centuries of work turned to smoke. And yet, remarkably, the library was not completely destroyed. Cleopatra is said to have restored part of its collection, possibly adding scrolls from the Library of Pergamon to replenish what was lost. The institution limped on, weakened but not dead, continuing to serve scholars for centuries. Still, the scars of the first destruction were permanent. It became a grim reminder that the world's greatest treasure, the knowledge of humanity, could be wiped away not by time, but by human hands in a single night of fire. This was not the end of the Library of Alexandria, but it marked the beginning of its decline. The first destruction was both a warning and a prophecy, showing that greatness can be fragile and that civilization's brightest light can be dimmed by the darkness of war. Greater tragedies were still to come, and the library's fate would remain forever uncertain, lost between history and legend. Although the Library of Alexandria may have survived Julius Caesar's fire, its survival was fragile. Over the following centuries, the city of Alexandria was shaken again and again by war, political turmoil, and cultural conflict. Each event chipped away at the dream that Ptolemy had once imagined, until the library became a shadow of its former glory. During the reign of Emperor Aurelian in the 3rd century CE, Alexandria found itself caught in yet another war. The Roman Empire clashed with Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, and the city suffered heavy damage. Historians believe that the Mouseion, the great academic institution connected to the library, was either destroyed or severely weakened during these battles. What had once been the world's brightest center of learning was beginning to fall silent. But perhaps the most dramatic blow came in 391 CE, when Emperor Theodosius IV declared Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire and banned pagan worship. In Alexandria, this decree had devastating consequences. The Serapeum, a magnificent temple that housed part of the library's collection, became the target of mobs driven by religious zeal. Eyewitnesses wrote of statues being toppled, scrolls being burned, and centuries of accumulated wisdom destroyed in the frenzy. Whether the main library still existed at this point or not remains debated, but the Serapeum's destruction marked the symbolic end of an age. Knowledge was not only vulnerable to war, but also to ideology, intolerance, and fanaticism. The pursuit of truth was sacrificed to power and politics. Then came the Arab conquest of Egypt in 642 CE. A story, written centuries later, claimed that Caliph Omar ordered the burning of the remaining books, saying, "If the texts agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are dangerous." Many modern historians doubt the authenticity of this account, believing it to be a legend invented much later. Still, the fact remains. By the time the Islamic era began, the Library of Alexandria had already vanished from existence. Natural disasters, too, played their part. Earthquakes shook Alexandria, fires broke out, and time slowly consumed the fragile papyrus scrolls. Unlike stone monuments, these delicate records of human genius could not withstand centuries of neglect. By the early Middle Ages, the Library of Alexandria was no longer mentioned in records. Its halls had grown silent, its scrolls had turned to dust, and its name lived on only in myth. The decline of the library is perhaps even more tragic than its destruction. For if it had ended in a single night of flames, we could at least point to one clear cause. Instead, the truth is far more painful. The world's greatest collection of knowledge was not lost in one moment, but eroded piece by piece, by war, by intolerance, by natural disaster, and by the indifference of time. What was once the beacon of civilization became nothing more than a legend. And yet, its legend endured, reminding humanity of both its brilliance and its fragility. The greatest tragedy of the Library of Alexandria is not only its destruction, but the mystery of what it contained. To this day, no one can say with certainty what treasures of human thought disappeared forever in the flames and chaos. Yet historians, poets, and dreamers have imagined the possibilities, and what they imagine is heartbreaking. It is believed that the library held the complete works of Greek playwrights like Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus. Today we have only fragments of their plays. The rest may have vanished in Alexandria's ashes. The same could be true for Aristotle's lost books, perhaps including insights into science, logic, and politics that might have shaped the course of Western thought centuries earlier. There may have been Egyptian medical papyri, describing advanced surgeries, herbal cures, and anatomical knowledge lost to time. Babylonian star maps and Mesopotamian astronomical records, built over thousands of years, could have provided a continuous picture of the skies. Indian mathematics, including early understandings of zero and infinity, might have been recorded here. Ancient Chinese manuscripts on medicine, philosophy, and inventions could also have been part of the collection. Some whisper that the library may even have contained detailed accounts of lost civilizations, peoples and cultures we know only through myth. The works of Herophilos, one of the first doctors to study the human brain and nervous system, were said to be stored there, but none survive today. Imagine how differently medicine might have evolved if such knowledge had not been lost. The library may also have held early engineering manuscripts, perhaps even blueprints of machines beyond the imagination of their time. Hero of Alexandria's designs gave us the first steam engine, but what if others had recorded similar inventions? Could humanity have entered the industrial age 1,000 years earlier? Astronomical theories, such as Aristarchus's heliocentric model, placing the sun at the center of the solar system, were likely destroyed. This idea was forgotten for over a millennium, until Copernicus revived it. Detailed world maps, perhaps charting unknown lands, may have perished as well. There are even legends that the library contained texts of alchemy, the ancestors of modern chemistry. Some suggest records of Atlantis or other mythical lands were hidden in its shelves. While these remain speculation, the possibility fuels the imagination of historians and storytellers alike. What makes the loss so haunting is not just the works themselves, but what they could have meant for humanity. If the knowledge had survived, perhaps diseases could have been cured earlier, technologies invented sooner, and conflicts avoided with greater wisdom. Humanity might have entered the modern age far ahead of schedule, but history left us only silence. The scrolls of the Library of Alexandria turned to ash or dust, and with them disappeared untold secrets of the ancient world. What exactly was lost, we may never know, and perhaps that is why the story of the library still stirs our imagination, because it reminds us of what might have been. The Library of Alexandria is remembered today not only as a monument to knowledge, but also as a haunting reminder of how fragile human achievement can be. More than 2,000 years later, its story still inspires scholars, artists, and dreamers across the globe. It stands as both a symbol of humanity's highest ambitions and a warning of how easily they can be destroyed. The library's legacy lives on in the idea that knowledge belongs to everyone and must be preserved for future generations. Out of its ashes, other centers of learning rose. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad during the Islamic Golden Age carried forward the mission of collecting and translating the world's knowledge. There, scholars studied Greek, Indian, and Persian texts, echoing the vision that Alexandria once embodied. In modern times, great institutions such as the British Library, the Library of Congress, and the Vatican Archives have been built with a similar dream: to gather, protect, and share the wisdom of the world. In 2002, the Egyptian government and UNESCO built the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a modern tribute to the ancient library with millions of books, digital archives, and research centers, a promise that Alexandria's light would shine again. But the story of the library is also a cautionary tale. It teaches us that knowledge is vulnerable not only to war and disaster, but also to intolerance, ideology, and neglect. Even today, conflicts around the world threaten museums, archives, and priceless manuscripts. The lesson of Alexandria is clear. If we do not actively protect our heritage, we risk losing it forever. In the digital age, the dream of Alexandria has taken on new form. The internet is, in many ways, the modern Library of Alexandria, a vast, interconnected network of human knowledge. But this too is fragile. Servers can fail, data can be corrupted, and censorship or war can erase information with the click of a button. The tragedy of Alexandria reminds us to safeguard not just books and scrolls, but digital memory as well. The library has also become a powerful metaphor in culture. Writers describe it as humanity's lost paradise of wisdom. Filmmakers use it as a symbol of what could have been. To scientists and historians, it represents the possibility that our progress might have been far greater if we had not allowed knowledge to be consumed by fire and time. In the end, the greatest lesson of the Library of Alexandria is simple yet profound. Knowledge is the light of civilization. Without it, we stumble in darkness. With it, we advance, we grow, and we build a better world. What was lost in Alexandria can never be recovered. But what we can preserve today will shape the destiny of tomorrow. As the story of the library closes, we are left with a question. Will we protect the wisdom of our age? Or will future generations tell stories of our failures just as we tell the story of Alexandria? The answer lies in our hands.